Hello. Continuing with Ralph Waldo Emerson, Self-Reliance. And I have a little background music playing on YouTube. It's actually from Vortex Success, that channel, and it's called Euphoric Relaxation, Ultimate Inner Peace, Subliminal Training, Binaural Beats. So you're not going to be able to hear the binaurals, which, if you're not familiar with binaural beats, they put sounds together, a combination of it. You're supposed to listen with headphones. One tone is going in one ear and the other one, there's a different tone here, and together the mind hears it in a certain one, and it helps the brain enhance whatever faculties or cognitive abilities. There's study music, there's something like this for relaxation, euphoric feelings, whatever it may be. So it's cool, just check it out. I'm gonna try it out and see how it helps with my reading today. So anyways, where we left off last time was with Emerson telling us that our purpose here now is to be guides, redeemers, and benefactors, obeying the almighty effort to advance against chaos and the dark. And then moving forward, he says that we have pretty oracles yielded by nature on this text, and in the face of the behavior, in the face and behavior of children, babes, and even brutes. That divided and rebel mind, that distrust of a sentiment because our arithmetic has computed the strength and means opposed to our purpose, these have not. Their mind being whole, their eye is as yet unconquered. And when we look in their faces, we are disconcerted. Again, referring back to children and babes, their mind being whole. They're still untrained or unconditioned, unprogrammed by parents and society. Nature and nurture, whatever their environment is, it hasn't impeded on their mind. And in the mind, the biological makeup of the human brain, the pineal gland, which sits in the back and is transferred up in here, and you'll see in common depictions of the third eye, as they call it. It's the gland, the pineal gland, which has features similar to that of a snake or reptile or animal that has two eyes here. And Emerson is very specific. He doesn't say their eyes yet unconquered, he says their eye is as yet unconquered. And in the snake, for example, this third eye that they have is a sensing eye. It senses, it's thermal, and it senses heat and things like that that aren't visible to their normal eyes. It's a sensing faculty, and it helps them in other ways to connect to that which is unseen. Similarly, we as human beings have a third eye. Look it up. And it's become less active or dormant through non-use over years. And we've also had this rumor floating around that fluoridation is detrimental to the faculties of the pineal gland, which is the imaginative or creative factor. Also in spiritual texts, they call it the seat of the soul. Mankind's connection to higher realms and higher states of consciousness. And if it's blocked off through age, through fluoridation, through consumption of water with fluoride, or toothpaste, or lots of products and different chemical, unnatural things in our society, that has started to stymie our creative faculties. Whereas children, their mind still being whole and their eye is as yet unconquered, you see them conforming to nobody. Adults conform to them. I don't know if I even read that part, but that's where he moves on to say. So he's saying that that imaginative nature, that creative nature that is as yet unconquered when we're children, is what we need to go back to as nonconformists and individuals and those who practice self-reliance. So let's continue. Again, talking of children and babes, their mind being whole, their eye is as yet unconquered, and when we look in their faces, we are disconcerted. Infancy conforms to nobody. All conform to it. So that one babe commonly makes 4 or 5 out of the adults who prattle and play to it, going, oh, goo goo gaga. Adults, we talk to babies like babies. We don't talk to them like adults. We don't rise them to our level. We conform to their level. And Emerson is saying there's power in that. There's power in that, staying true to your nature. Even though you're a baby, you're not thinking about it. Or are you? We don't know. They can't talk yet. But he goes on to say, God has armed youth and puberty and manhood no less with its own piquancy and charm, and made it enviable and gracious, and its claims not to be put by, if it will stand by itself. Do not think the youth has no force because he cannot speak to you and me. Hark! In the next room his voice is sufficiently clear and emphatic. It seems he knows how to speak to his contemporaries, because a baby crying in the other room is going to get you to run over there to it. So he's saying that a baby has power, that the youth has power. And I love that here, because he says, do not think that the youth has no force because he cannot speak to you and me. And that's kind of where I'm getting at. The youth of people, those who have fallen into conformity, still have power because we still have our minds. Moving forward, bashful or bold then, he will know how to make us seniors very unnecessary. We, as educated, informed people, practicing, using our minds to think, and the wisdom and knowledge that has been laid out before us, as applying that, we are going to make the systems around us that shackle us very unnecessary. Mark my words. Moving on, the nonchalance of boys who are sure of a dinner and would disdain as much as a lord to do or say aught to conciliate one is the healthy attitude of human nature. The nonchalance of boys sure of a dinner, so they know what they're going to get. They know that at the end of the day they're going to be fed. Their needs are going to be met by their parents, so they don't have this rigid nature to conform and comply with everything around them. So it says they would disdain as much as a lord. So a lord, back in the olden days, someone who's very respectable, right? They would still disdain or brush aside whoever you are, because you're not going to get in the way of them and what they are due, their fair due. He moves on to say that that's the healthy attitude of human nature. A boy is in the parlor what the pit is in the playhouse, independent, irresponsible, looking out from his corner on such people and facts as pass by. He tries and sentences them on their merits in the swift, summary way of boys, as good, bad, interesting, silly, eloquent, troublesome. He cumbers himself never about consequences, about interests. He gives an independent, genuine verdict. So to explain that, he cumbers himself. He doesn't burden himself with thinking about consequences or what says interests. As adults, what do? Before we speak to someone, we concern ourselves with the consequences of it. Oh, I'm talking to my boss and telling him that I think that that's actually not a moral idea to raise prices and only raise prices on these low-income housing places, because, that's just a bad example. Like anything immoral. He tells me to change the numbers of his group's performance because his big meeting's coming up. But he's my boss, so I'm not going to speak up. Or I have this client, Nike, and they're huge, and I figured out about the unfair manufacturing practices or of labor problems going on with where they're manufacturing. They're not using holistic, healthy methods, but it's a big client, so I'm going to keep them. Boys don't concern themselves with consequences or interests. They speak clearly. They try you based on your merits. They judge you based on what you present to them, not how you're going to benefit them in the future or what kind of ties we have. They're honest, and they will give you an independent and genuine verdict. And Emerson is saying that that's how we should be. Again, he says of the boy, you must court him. He does not court you. What does he say of the babe and the child? Infancy conforms to nobody. All conform to it. So he's giving these examples throughout our time when we started off as independent nonconformists, and over time we're trained out of that. So what we do right now is not the natural way. He's telling us that the true nature is what is best for us. Going forward, he says, but the man is, as it were, clapped into jail by his consciousness. As soon as he has once acted or spoken with éclat, He is a committed person watched by the sympathy or the hatred of hundreds whose affections must now enter into his account. There is no lethe for this, all that he could pass again into his neutrality. So let's go over that a little bit more. Man is clapped into jail by his consciousness. Now that man is aware of consequences and interests in not speaking his truth, he's clapped into jail by that conscious awareness or that thinking about what others think. He says that as soon as one has acted or spoken with éclat, I looked that word up, E-C-L-A-T. What that is that it's basically esteem or prestige to be thought highly of, and people basically adore you for something that you've done. So basically once you've spoken and you've gotten some attention on you, and then you have, he says, he's a committed person. Now you're committed. You have been watched by the sympathy or the hatred of hundreds whose affections must now enter into his account. You're now conscious of people's opinions of you, and now you're kind of like stuck in that phase where you either have to live up to that éclat, you have to live up to that prestige, or you have to be kind of looking over your back all the time and feeling like ashamed because you're not rising to that judgment time and time again, because now you are aware of them. Now your actions are dependent on others' opinions of you. And he says, there is no lethe for this, capital L-E-T-H-E. I looked that up. That's in Greek mythology. There were 2 rivers that they say, actually 5 rivers of the underworld or the afterlife. And Lethe was the name of a river where you were said to be taken, or souls are to be taken, and they drink from this river in order to forget their past, in order to be born again into a new life. So it's a river of forgetfulness to wash away the history of your bad deeds or of your sins or anything of your past life. You need to be born anew. So you drink from the river Lethe. And he's saying that once you've acted or spoken with prestige in something, you're stymied and you're totally at the whim of the consciousness of all those around you who are judging you, and there's no Lethe for this. You can't forget that you've once been great and now all these other people's opinion of you matters. You're in the tabloids now. You're on the cover of this and everybody's judging you. And then he says, that he could pass into his neutrality again, which is elaborating on the river Lethe. If you could just drink from that river and then forget that, then you could just go back into being normal and not really having to live up to any standard. Who can thus avoid all pledges, and having observed, observe again from the same unaffected, unbiased, unbribable, unaffrighted innocence must always be formidable. He would utter opinions on all passing affairs, which being seen to be not private but necessary, would sink like darts into the ear of men and put them in fear. So he who actually does not conform and gives his opinion, not in a harmful way, but just being honest, is formidable. Because Nike wouldn't like that, right? They want you to go ahead and just turn the other way while they're doing what they're doing. But Emerson says, no, you should be like the babe, you should be like the boy, you should be in adulthood, able to give unbiased, unaffected, unbribable, unaffrighted, innocent observations of those things. Speak your truth. Trust thyself. These are the voices which we hear in solitude, but they grow faint and inaudible as we enter into the world. Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. This is what we're talking about. Society is a joint stock company in which the members agree for the better securing of his bread to each shareholder to surrender the liberty and culture of the eater. Stop surrendering your rights. Stop surrendering to conforming to society and systems that do not serve you, obeying to not speak your truth in the face of what consequence that is to your position or your state, what people will judge you as for speaking your truth. You're not speaking based on interest. You're speaking based on heart and divine will. He goes on to say that the virtue in most request is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion. It loves not realities and creators, but names and customs. Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. He who would gather immortal palms must not be hindered by the name of goodness, but must explore if it be goodness. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. Absolve you to yourself, and you shall have the suffrage of the world. I remember an answer which, when quite young, I was prompted to make to a valued adviser who was wont to importune me with the dear old doctrines of the Church. On my saying, "What do I have to do with sacredness of traditions if I live wholly from within?" my friend suggested, "But these impulses may be from below, not from above." I replied, "They do not seem to me to be such, but if I am the devil's child, I will live then from the devil. No law can be sacred to me but that of my nature. Good and bad are but names very readily transferable to that or this. The only right is what is after my constitution, the only wrong what is against it." Now, I don't necessarily like that he says that I would be of the devil, but he's not talking literally. What he's saying is that what I believe that my actions are in my private heart, they don't seem to be bad. So when someone who is a supposed authority, someone who's supposed to be teaching me the doctrine of the Church, says to me, when I ask the question, what do I have to do with traditions if I live wholly by I live wholly from within by trusting myself? And they told him, well, what if that's not coming from above? What if it's coming from below? And he's saying, it's not subject to what ifs and whimsy. I know that I'm living what's right, and so it's not questionable. And if what you say is what feels right in my heart of hearts is wrong or from below, then I'm going to live by that because I feel like that's true. He just gives the extreme of saying, if it is from the devil, then I'll live from the devil. But again, he goes on to say that the only wrong is that which is against your own inner constitution. A man is to carry himself in the presence of all opposition as if everything were titular or ephemeral but he. I am ashamed to think how easily we capitulate to badges and names, to large societies and dead institutions. Every decent and well-spoken individual affects and sways me more than is right. I ought to go upright and vital and speak the rude truth in all ways. If malice and vanity wear the coat of philanthropy, shall that pass? If an angry bigot assumes this bountiful cause of abolition and comes to me with his last news from Barbados, why should I not say to him, go love thy infant, love thy woodchopper, be good-natured and modest, have that grace, and never varnish your hard uncharitable ambition with this incredible tenderness for black folk 1,000 miles off. Thy love afar is spite at home. Rough and graceless would be such greeting, but truth is handsomer than the affectation of love. Your goodness must have some edge to it, else it is none. So here, this example again from the time period where he was, he's saying if your philanthropy is malice, if malice and vain people wear the coat of philanthropy, shall we let that pass? If we have people that we know to be crooks and robbers or people that support inhumane treatment in their manufacturing business, say we're still using Nike or any one of these companies, Walmart for example, where they have people working in shoddy buildings in Bangladesh that are crashing down from the floor within them while they're working for pennies on the dollar, should we let that pass because they have some sort of American Heart Association Red Cross walk once a year and they give a little bit of money to that? No, we should look at them and we should tell them, go love your infant, love your woodchopper, be good-natured and modest, have that grace in your own personal life. Not just go do charity hundreds of thousands of miles away and then say where you wear a badge and a pat on the back. No, you need to be true at home. You need to be true in your innermost heart. And he's basically saying you need to charge people with that question of their authenticity, not just look at the surface of what charities and charitable ambitions they have. It's like you said, you have to question if goodness be goodness, not just because it's said to be good in society. And thy love afar is spite at home. If you're not being true at home as you are afar, to question those things. And yes, that opinion or that speaking or charging people with that, asking them those tough questions, it's rough and it's graceless, but according to Emerson, goodness must have some edge on it or else it is not good. I don't know if I agree with that completely. In the ideal society that we move towards, maybe we wouldn't have to be that rough on people, but yes, it's necessary right now as part of the transition. Moving forward, he says, the doctrine of hatred must be preached as the counteraction of the doctrine of love. When that pules and whines, I shun father and mother and wife and brother when my genius calls me. I would write on the lintels of the doorpost, whim. I hope it is somewhat better than whim at last, but we cannot spend the day in explanation. Expect me not to show cause why I seek or why I exclude company. Then again, do not tell me, as a good man did today, of my obligation to put all poor men in good situations. Are they my poor? I tell thee, thou foolish philanthropist, that I grudge the dollar, the dime, the cent I give to such men as do not belong to me and to whom I do not belong. There is a class of persons to whom, by all spiritual affinity, I am bought and sold. For them I will go to prison if need be. But your miscellaneous popular charities, the education at colleges of fools, the building of meeting houses to the vain end to which many now stand, alms to sots, and the thousandfold relief societies, though I confess with shame I sometimes succumb and give the dollar, it is a wicked dollar, which by and by I shall have the manhood to withhold. Again, he's talking about charity. Like the idea, is charity virtuous? Is handouts virtuous? They have that saying, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man how to fish, he'll never go hungry again. The question is not saying that you're a bad person if you give to a charity, but what is true charity? Being good to yourself, being good to your neighbors, being good to mankind. If everyone did their part in doing so, we wouldn't have these false systems built up of charities which we don't even know if the money is going to the cause. That's how bad it's gotten, because that's how far we've come from truth and critical analysis of what's going on around us. And he says that by and by he'll have the manhood to withhold from that societal norm, because he admits he conforms at time to it. And we all do. I'm going to take a break and get some water.